Is there any possibility Mick Cronin decides to shuffle his lineup in the beginning of Big Ten play or for the rest of the season?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast. It's your team every day. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. So all you got to do is bet a $5 bet. Put in a $5 bet if you're a new customer. If you win, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to learn more and to get started. Where we get started today, UCLA is on the verge of beginning their first ever conference campaign in the basketball schedule as a Big Ten team. Well, what does that mean? It means none other than they get to play two West Coast schools. Two West Coast schools as they take on Washington at home, and then a humongous Oregon game on Sunday, late afternoon, early evening, depending on where you're watching it from, against the 12th-ranked Ducks. First off, though, the Bruins going to take on the Huskies. The Huskies are a 6-1 team. They won their little challenge out in Palm Springs against two beatable opponents. They did also lose to a Mountain West team, so this is a battle of two one-loss Big Ten teams who, away from home, took on Mountain West foes and lost by 8 to 10 or more points. All right. This is a game for UCLA. I think they're going to win. I think they should win fine. And they're facing a Washington team that has a new coach. They've got Danny Sprinkle over there. He has led two separate schools to the tournament in back-to-back years and brought great hosts aboard with him everywhere from Montana State to Utah State to now Washington. And that's the big man UCLA is going to have to work on. However, he's 6'8", and nothing against the 6'8" big man, but what's going to destroy UCLA this year, what we've seen what New Mexico had, was size all across the board. And that is not something Washington has, nor have they shown the ability, in my mind, to light it up from deep ridiculously to put UCLA on edge in this game, unless something changes. Say the local SoCal great DJ Davis, who started his career at UC Irvine, gets going, then I think UCLA should be able to handle this. But this is a chance to see Cronin, in what hopes to be a more competitive scenario, refine his rotation. He said to the media earlier, I'm going to be playing 10 guys pretty much the whole season. And you could read into his verbiage. Does that mean he's going to leave out, say, Dominic Harris? Is it going to be 10 or more, or is it just a round number? We're going to play 10 or more guys, right? So he's going to focus on 10 guys. And he mentioned that, especially with Brandon Williams, Devin Williams, all redshirting, UCLA's big men are going to be stuck with a die. It's going to be William Kyle. Those two guys will have to perform. And maybe they'll get some run in this Washington game. But considering the Huskies aren't going to scare UCLA with their size that they'll try out there, it's going to probably be a similar lineup to what we've seen the last few times. It's been Bilodeau, it's been Daly, Dylan Andrews, and then Skyy Clark as your starting 4 or 5, depending on with Kobe Johnson, of course. What UCLA tries out there, that's been, without injury, your starting lineup almost every game. What does UCLA need to do to figure out the rotation? Do they have to bump somebody into the starting lineup? Does it mean, do they have to cut off Dominic Harris at this point because UCLA hasn't gotten any production out of him in his 6 appearances, 10 minutes? He's averaging 1 point a game, a little over that, and his 3-point shooting is 11% from 3 for someone who is a top 3-point shooter literally in his conference and across the country. Now, what can the Bruins do to find ways to figure that into a better number? Well, one could say, well, UCLA has the shooting around the board that they should be able to withstand the lack of shooting right now, right? Well, when you look at the other big transfer they got to score and get buckets, he's the 10th best scorer on the team right now. That's Skyy Clark. In the 10 guys Cronin regularly plays, Skyy Clark has started every single game. He averages a little over 23 minutes per game, so he's playing more than half the game. Some of those in some garbage time minutes, a lot of those in big time moments when the game's somewhat close. And Clark's averaging a little under 5 points per game, and his 3-point numbers are also atrocious. And I misspoke when it came to Dominic Harris. He's shooting 11% from the field. Dominic Harris is actually shooting less than 10% from three, 1 of 14. Skyy Clark is 3 of 14. So two of your best 3-point shooters you've gotten from the portal are a combined 4 for 28. And last year, they were much, much better than that. Cronin kind of focused the majority of his talking with the media a little bit about Skyy Clark. He's making it in practice, right? What coaches will always say, what you see in practice is a large part what you're going to see in games. It's the work ethic. It's the building over the few years. It's the offseason regimen. And right now, UCLA is stuck with a couple players who just aren't putting in buckets. Now, I'm not sure UCLA is going to give that much runtime to Dominic Harris at the moment until something starts to click. But what UCLA needs is Skyy Clark to start getting buckets. And I would like to see in this game against Washington where Mick Cronin says, hey, we want to feed this kid and get him buckets. I know Bilodeau is going to get his. He's averaging about 14 per game. You got Daly Jr., who at 7 games in, I did not think Daly Jr. would have started every game, nor would he be second on the team in scoring. One of 2 players to average 12 or more in this team, one of 2 players to average 10 or more, as Sebastian Mack just narrowly misses the mark with his 9.9 points per game, basically a 10-point per game score. Where UCLA is shooting the 3 ball right now, 31%. So Cronin says he's not going to really tighten his rotation. What does that mean when the minutes begin to crunch against the Washingtons of the world, against the 12th ranked Oregon Ducks out of nowhere, who swept the Players Era Festival tournament by beating top-tier teams such as Alabama to win that Thanksgiving Feast Week tournament? And they went from unranked. The one time I truly watched the Ducks, they almost lost to Portland at home, and now they're 8-0, and they're on the fast track to being a top 10 team with UCLA playing them on the road in one of the toughest early games UCLA is going to have to play in Big Ten Conference with the early 2 games locally. It's going to be interesting. Cronin, does he need to shorten the rotation? I think he doesn't need to take people out. He doesn't need to take players out. He can still work out who's coming off the bench. But I do think there is some wiggle room for who's going to get the ball in certain times. Who does he need to get ready to go and find the player early, right? Say against Washington, I like UCLA to run the ball and give Skyy Clark some early shots and get him going and get a double figure, get a 15-point night out of him. Maybe it's not so loud, but get 15 points out of him against Washington, and then that can get him going. Hopefully 3 threes at an efficient rate. And he's one of those guys UCLA needs to start plucking out of the woodworks and be like, hey, we need you to get going. Who does UCLA need a lot more from? William Kyle and Adimar. They've slowly tag teaming into 20 minutes per game and building into better rebounders, better low post scorers, but Adai's not as strong in the post, and William Kyle is not as settled on his offensive game. Those two things don't exactly mix and match when you want to dominate teams like UCLA could and should with their size in the post. They still might, but maybe not as effectively as they should be going into this game against Washington. Other things to make note of course, the Oregon Ducks. That's a huge game for UCLA. You looked at the Arizona games, the North Carolina games, the Gonzaga games. All those teams lost in the Feast Week tournament, so they all fell. Arizona actually fell out of the rankings, and Oregon jumps up to the top 12, top 10, depending on which ranking systems you're using. So this turns into a very pivotal week for UCLA's Big Ten chances and the national relevancy for the Bruins, because the Ducks have already done it. If UCLA struggles at home against Washington, that's not going to put any of the fans, any of the national pundits at ease. Like, hey, this is a UCLA team that's talented enough to get far, but why aren't they producing against everybody they should? We'll learn a lot about UCLA and Washington, but mostly the Bruins when they play a team that a solid coach, a lot of transfers on the Husky squad, just like UCLA has, who can come out in a Big Ten game and who has had a better prepared schedule. Neither one of them. They haven't played a tough schedule until now. Washington's played a much tougher schedule than UCLA at this point, quite honestly. And I still think UCLA should win this game by double digits, barring a late backdoor cover by Washington in a last gasp minute-long effort, right? That would go on the segment of bad beats. Does Cronin need to reduce the rotation? He just needs to get guys going. And so I say you aim for Skyy Clark as the first guy to start scoring. And then at some point, UCLA, to be successful this season, I'm still very much on the bandwagon that Dominic Harris needs to start shooting better. He's proven it on the court elsewhere. Now, can UCLA pull that out of him in Westwood at his third stop? Or is it, a lost season in certain regards for some of these guys? We'll find out. Just like we'll talk about more UCLA football, 5-7 to wrap up the 2024 campaign. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you bet $5, you can win and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app has everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you want to view the live play-by-play and stats and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make every moment more by going to FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, cruising on here in Locked On UCLA, second segment, the Bruins. Let's get ready. They have wrapped up their 2024 season, which means one of the more pivotal off seasons in UCLA's history. No, it wasn't the one in between Chip Kelly leaving and DeShaun Foster getting hired into this 2024 season, which this team had more talent than we probably hoped for. And the last two seasons, you could have said, between Chip Kelly and DeShaun Foster, ended up being wasted with an 8-win season to 5-win season this year, right? An offense that I think left a lot to be desired and a defense that was totally left out to dry in 2023. Well, that's what we're left with, which means if DeShaun Foster wants to revitalize this program that currently has tarps in its Rose Bowl, that currently is needing to still earn a lot of respect, and with USC currently fading in a weird regard under Lincoln Riley, this is a chance to, end some sort of monopoly that USC just doesn't have on Los Angeles right now. They're not dominating the national landscape, and when they did a couple of years ago, they failed on the Pac-12 championship game and in their New Year's Six bowl game. So they haven't really done anything in many years. So this is a chance for UCLA and DeShaun Foster to go 4s up, 2s down, who run this town. Well, first you got to go win the portal. You got to do that and build off what UCLA did to finish the regular season, which was have a much better second half of the season. UCLA started off 1-5, and they finished off the year 4-2. All right. Now, if UCLA wins some of those close games against Washington, Minnesota, USC, take your pick, then UCLA is going bowling this year. The most brutal of those games, I would say, is the Minnesota game because they should have won that game. USC is brutal, obviously, with the rivalry aspect, and I think they could have and should have won that game too. And we have differing opinions about the Washington game, but this team was that close to a bowling season. If you're super optimistic, you say UCLA was this close to an 8-win season. If you're super pessimistic, you say, UCLA could have found themselves as bad as a 3-win season. Well, they weren't a 3-win team, and nor were they an 8-win team. But they did enough to end the Fresno State skid, not really get disrespected, I think, by playing one of the toughest schedules in the country, and now having to go through a full offseason with an offensive coordinator that has been much maligned, but still now with a year under his belt can probably put in more installs. That's the hope, that next year UCLA's offense will be much better. They can go in the portal and grab so many offensive linemen that, they're not hurting when they're down to their fourth string tackle, when they're not looking for guys to shift who's starting center, who's starting guard, when they can be a lot deeper and a lot better on the offensive line, be much better running the ball. Because remember, TJ Harden, J. Michael Sturdivant, technically Logan Lawyer, but he walked on senior day. There's a lot of these offensive pieces that can still return and are very good. Of course, the most exciting, I think, is Quasi Gilmer's freshman season. He didn't put up a crazy big game, but he has been a bright spot to watch. And all we got to hope is that Justin Martin makes the huge strides next year after he got a taste of what it's like to be a starting quarterback against a top 5 team on the road. Or UCLA pivots and goes with a freshman quarterback currently committed to them is Madden Iamaleava, even though he didn't play his senior high school season, played one game before transferring and being declared ineligible by CAF Southern Section. A lot of question marks. But what wasn't a question mark was that UCLA ended the season off with a nice W, beating Fresno State, ending that ugly skid against that team from the Central Valley. And I know it'll be, close to a decade before they actually go play Fresno State at Fresno State, which I think will be a rocking environment. One I think most people should try to drive up north to and get a ticket in a long time, which means nothing to us now. But the Bruins won 20-13. How did DeShaun Foster's team look? Well, one of the things that UCLA needs to fix in the offseason, heading to next year, the discipline factor. It really cost them in the U.S. It cost them in every game, let's be real. When they played Nebraska and won, they led 3 touchdown drives to be scored on 3 15-yard penalties. It cost them against USC when they kicked off on their own 5-yard line to start the half, which I think is ridiculous. And then against Fresno State, UCLA committed almost 7 penalties before they finished Fresno State's first offensive possession completely. Like, that is just unacceptable for any program of any level, right? That's Pee Wee football level lack of discipline, not learning how to game. You probably can go to a flag football game and not see that many flags pulled, right? With the kids missing the flags, the officials throwing flags, all those things. But here we are, UCLA showcase what they were. Ethan Garber's making a couple scrambles, making some plays, throwing for 289 and a touchdown. And then UCLA with a little bit of a under-the-weather TJ Harden, feeding the super senior Keegan Jones, and then going with Anthony Frias the second, mustered up a mediocre running day. The offense left a lot to be desired. They went 4 out of 5 scoring the red zone, could have scored more points, including the play action on 4th and 1 that was dropped, would have been a touchdown, would have completely changed the game. Instead, UCLA fell just a little bit short on completing that 4th and 1. I thought it was a great call. I like the aggressiveness there. The Bruins fell a little short. In the end, UCLA at best offensively when it comes to execution in critical moments, a C+ in this game. And in the end, from what we saw against Hawaii to what we saw against Fresno State, we saw some highs and some lows, but generally we saw what this UCLA team was, a best C+ on offense, at best. At best, C+ on offense. But we have to give commends to Ethan Garbers, who ended his career with a victory and probably got the short end of the stick, right? Against with a decent offensive line, Ethan Garbers led UCLA down the field against Pitt in their bowl game of the Sun Bowl to win a game that they should have won against Pitt with a last-minute drive before the defense just blew it against the Pitt Panthers, right? Then now you've got Garbers for the last 2 years, different coaches, different offensive schemes, one more complicated than the last one, and he had a poor offensive line. I think he deserves a lot of credit for going through the quarterback struggles, the freshman coming in, losing his job, gaining it back, getting hurt almost every other week, it seemed like, before finishing off his career with UCLA with a win. I think he deserved that. The running game, TJ Harden can still come back. He still can. Whether he transferred, he's got another year. It was supposed to be a big year for TJ Harden. Combine that with Keegan Jones. There was a much bigger role for Jalen Berger than I expected this year, but I really liked what the fifth-year senior did for UCLA, despite him being a little too injured to go in the last game of his career, unfortunately. UCLA has a lot that they can still do with the running game, just with TJ Harden alone. UCLA, I think, in this game got their first rushing touchdown since early October with TJ running it in for the game-winning score late. Like, isn't that ridiculous? Isn't that ridiculous that his third quarter rushing touchdown was UCLA's first rushing touchdown in a very long time? And it was the first rushing touchdown that didn't have to deal with like an Ethan Garbers of sorts. Again, C+ at best for an offense that was one of the worst, converting red zone possessions into touchdowns. 2, we're going to miss Maliki Matavao. We're going to miss Logan Loya and potentially a J. Michael Sturdivant, right? But we're going to miss Logan Loya, Maliki Matavao, almost as much as UCLA missed Rico Flores Jr. this entire season. All right? There's a lot for UCLA that they can still utilize next year but the tight end position is something UCLA has to go and attack in the portal. They absolutely do. That's how they got Maliki Matavao in the first place. And if Habermill didn't go down early, I wonder how much that could have added to UCLA on the tight end position. But I thought Bryce Pierre did just enough when he came in and made some clutch catches in certain opportunities. Defensively, though, that's where UCLA, again, surprisingly, for the second straight season, hung their hat. After lots of defensive coordinators came in and out for various reasons under Chip Kelly, the Bruins somewhat solidified themselves last year. And then everything blew up, we thought, losing key starting players in the secondary, losing guys to the NFL draft or to the NFL on the D-line. And the Bruins were still able to muster a strong defense, such as the emergence of Carson Schlesinger. 15 tackles, a sack, a pass defended. He blocked a punt. He did literally everything, did Schlesinger, in this game to try and prove he was the real Butkus Award winner, right? From walk-on, the story gets told every time UCLA plays a game, and with them not playing a bowl game, we'll have to tell it one more time. But he is a guy that went out, it was dominant. Combined with his buddy on the field and Kane Medrano, those two combined for 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, and 23 total tackles, 18 solo tackles between those two guys. If Schlesinger, who did walk on senior day, walks with Medrano, that is a huge hole in the linebacker room for next season, and a lot of work Ikaika Malloy is going to have to do in coaching up current players committed, current players in the locker room, and going to find superstars in the portal, all right? Because portal season has already started. USC's starting quarterback is already in the portal, Miller Moss, former starting quarterback. UCLA's already got a commit in the receiver room from a former Arkansas receiver. Portaling, just like almost Christmas caroling, it's already started. Some say it's too early, but it's the reality of the situation. Defensively in this game, UCLA did what I asked of them. They held Fresno State to under 75 yards rushing, which is a ridiculous aggressive ask, but Fresno State pinned their hopes on the passes of Mikey Keene, and the Bruins did not let Keene beat them. 219 yards and a touchdown. No turnovers from the offenses in this game. It came down to a special teams turnover. But UCLA, the lack of discipline in this game and the inability to punch it in kept what was a close game into something UCLA should have won this game by 2 scores and convincingly. Alas, that was the story of the season. The defense, I'll give them a B performance for their final year, part of the year. Maybe an A, but, a B for this one. And special teams, they blocked a punt. They recovered a fumble on a punt return. But Ghani really solidified the kicking situation that was absolutely awful last year and has been better than UCLA kickers probably since Kaimi Fairbairn, right? He's holding it down in the NFL. I think UCLA is having quite a resurgence in the kicking game. We just got to wait for UCLA to build something into a true return game. All right. And we somewhat got that with Keegan Jones returning 1 kick for 34 yards. Overall, the Bruins got the job done. They beat Fresno State. And now we look forward to UCLA season opener in August of 25 against Utah. Unless they move the schedule and they change it one more time, the Bruins, we wait till next year, and we'll talk a lot about the portaling season in future episodes to come. Next, we're going to talk about the UCLA women. They're still number 1, not unanimously, but they're number 1 in the country, and survived a bit of a scare against Hawaii in the Rainbow Wahine Showdown out on the islands. Talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. All right, I encourage you to go check out these Bruins, right? It's about to be Big Ten season, technically, for a little bit. They start off and play Washington. Use Game Time to get your tickets, all right? UCLA has been known to have some of the worst attendance. Let's change that. We're in a new conference. Everything's going. Game Time picks can help you get last-minute deals on those tickets, and they won't make it a hassle for you as you try to get to Pauley Pavilion. Game Time tickets, you can see your pricing if you toggle on the feature to see all-in pricing before you buy your ticket, so you're not surprised with any fees before you buy. And there's a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Go support your Bruins and download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Cruising on here in Locked On UCLA, we're talking about the women's team, and they dominated. They won 3 straight games in 3 days at the Rainbow Wahine Showdown. It was the championship game of sorts. UCLA dominated UT Martin, despite a slow start. Then they dominated Fresno State. And then all of a sudden, the final game of the weekend, UCLA, 3 games in 3 days. Not something that they'll have to face in any scenario other than the Big Ten tournament. And I'll have to get reminded about what the Big Ten tournament scenario looks like. They have it like a build-up scenario where not every team of the 18 teams in the conference is going to make the conference tournament for either the men or the women. They're going to cut it off at some point like they should. You can't just let 18 teams make a conference tournament, although it would be pretty fun to watch that happen. UCLA, they're going to have like a triple bye. So I'm not even sure if they're going to have to play that many games. But even then, UCLA played the most amount of games they're going to play in a row, kind of setting the stage. You traveled far. How can they quickly change from one scout to a next, dealing with the travel schedule? And they were a bit tired on Sunday when they played Hawaii, who came in 5-1, a Big West team that made a tournament pretty recently. UCLA, the final score does not indicate how close this game was for a little bit. They won 70-49 against the Rainbow Wahine. Lauren Betts, obviously the tournament MVP, puts in big numbers left and right. But the Bruins, despite starting off this game with an 11-point lead, let Hawaii crawl back in there after they got red hot in the second quarter. They started off atrocious from the field, did Hawaii. And the next thing you know, they come in with 22 second quarter points, giving UCLA more of a fight than South Carolina did. Obviously, South Carolina would have given UCLA more of a fight for a third game in 3 days because the Gamecocks are now currently number 3 in the country, blowing out their last 2 opponents. But here Hawaii was fighting, and all of a sudden, it was a 3-point game at the half for UCLA, playing a true road game. And I think that's why they set it up the way they did, right? Get Hawaii, the last game of the weekend. Both teams were coming in a championship game scenario of sorts. And UCLA was not shooting well. They were 18% from 3. The real reason they dominated this game is because they outclassed. They just outmuscled. They got more rebounds than Hawaii. They were plus 18 grabbing rebounds. And as poorly as UCLA shot from 3, the weapon of Lauren Betts inside with 42% shooting, UCLA outshot the Bows by a wide margin in field goal percentage. In this game, UCLA, though, it was nice to see the reemergence from Kiki Rice. Lauren Betts had 18 points. Surprisingly, despite UCLA dominating the boards, Betts played a total of 20 minutes, had 3 rebounds, 18 points. This was the Kiki Rice show. 21 points on 70% shooting, made 50%, made 2 of her threes, made all her free throws, and played 30 minutes, which means she's feeling better. Corey Close leaned on her star junior point guard to come in, make a lot of shots, make some plays. And when you have somebody that's probably got a little more energy in the tank, hopefully, she utilized that and showed up for a game where UCLA then outscored the Bows 24-10 in the third quarter, opened up what was a close 3-point game at the half, nearly a 20-point lead in the third, and eventually turned into a 21-point romp in the fourth quarter. Some of the culprits for UCLA, Gabriela Jaquez with 11.7 rebounds. She has been red hot on fire. I think she had a perfect night shooting against UT Martin. I talked about the other night. The emergence of Jaquez also playing 30 nights in this game, shooting lights out in a couple of those games in Hawaii. That bodes well for UCLA when they need to find the scoring. But in the end, you could see how UCLA was just tired, right? London Jones, 0 for 6 on the floor. Jamea Gardner, the 2 of them combined to go 1 for 11. 2 of UCLA's best shooters, not even getting there, all right? Alina Arnasalo, something I thought was interesting. She came off the bench in this game. UCLA went with Dugalich in the starting lineup. She was a little cold, 1 for 8. Arnasalo still played 23 minutes off the bench, took less shots, but had 4 assists to UCLA's 2 turnovers. Interesting that UCLA brought the freshman off the bench from this game. I didn't really see anything that Corey Close had to say, but the decision-making into UCLA playing and how they try to mix and match the minutes, this was a game where hopefully this sparks a super strong stretch of play by Kiki Rice where if she's putting up 21, that's something she can put in 13, 14, 15 points in the regular to give UCLA that slashing option that can shoot a little bit, mixed in with Lauren Betts inside. And then generally between a Gardner and a Jones, those two can give UCLA those outside shooting options, along with the depth of options UCLA has on the bench and the starting lineup, all to make them what is currently the number one team in the country. A little bit scary through 20 minutes against Hawaii, but it just seemed like they're a bit weary playing 3 games in 3 days. Something to keep note of. It's not as guaranteed you're going to dominate every game as it used to in the past. A little more parity now in the women's college game, and hopefully UCLA is a team that can still dominate all the opponents in front of them with rest and travel, the battle they'll have to deal with all season long. Right now, UCLA unbeaten, unquestioned, number one team in the country. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.